What happened to the kid who ran the black market in your school? My boy Malik ran the hardest Depop store in all of 10th grade. He'd sit outside shoe stores all night till they opened, and as soon as they did, he'd buy out their stock with the cheddar he got from working at McD's. Some of the shoes he got were fake, but he always managed to market them as real. Until one Tuesday, when I watched Malik sell fake Travis Scott Jordans to this sophomore for $400. The kid had been begging him for weeks, showing up at his locker with cash in hand every morning. And Malik kept saying no, he only dealt with juniors and seniors. But when Lil Bro upped his offer to $550, Malik caved. I remember him counting those 20s right there in the hallway, that smile on his face like he'd just hit the lotto. Everything was cool for exactly 2 days. Thursday morning, first period, Malik slid into the seat next to me, and his hands were literally shaking with fear. Like he'd seen death. He showed me his phone under the desk and my stomach dropped. 38 texts from an unknown number. The first few were almost polite. Hey, you sold my brother fake shoes. But by message 10, it got dark. You think you're slick? Then, I know where your locker is. By message 30, I was reading, see you tomorrow, and the last one just said, you're gonna bleed. The thing was, I knew exactly who sent those messages. The sophomore's older brother was Dante Moriga, 6'3" linebacker, and the same dude who jumped 3 kids in the parking lot last year. One of them still walked with a limp. Our whole table saw those texts. Nobody said nothing, but everyone was thinking the same thing. Malik was cooked. You don't mess with Dante's family. I watched my boy spiral all day. During second period, he was Googling if you could transfer schools mid-semester. At lunch, he barely touched his food, just kept checking the windows like Dante might pull up. He pulled out his wallet and counted the money 3 times, but we both knew he'd already blown most of it on inventory. The crazy part was watching other kids find out. By 5th period, half the school knew Malik was getting his ass beat tomorrow. People were literally taking bets on whether he'd even show. But then some wild shit happened. End of lunch, Malik got this look on his face. Not scared no more. Almost like he was laughing inside. He turned to me and went, I figured it out. I asked him what he meant, but he just shook his head. All he said was, you know my mom's is a prosecutor, right? I thought bro had lost it. What was his mom gonna do, prosecute Dante for beating his ass after it happened? Next morning, I was walking to school and I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Malik was walking through the front entrance, but he wasn't alone. His mom's was right next to him. Full power suit, briefcase, heels clicking on the pavement like she owned the whole block. She was bad as hell too, and she didn't even look at Malik, just marched straight to the principal's office. That's when it clicked. This man really told his prosecutor mother some version of what went down. But what did he tell her? I was sitting in first period, perfect view of the parking lot from our window. 8:15, I saw Dante pull up. He was sitting in his whip for a minute, probably getting his mind right. When he got out, he was cracking his knuckles like some movie villain. A few kids outside literally scattered when they saw him walking toward the entrance. Then I saw Malik walking up from the other direction. My heart was going crazy just watching this unfold. Dante spotted him immediately. Yo! Even through the window, I could hear it. Where's my bread? But Malik didn't stop, didn't run, just kept walking toward the main entrance. Dante started following him, getting louder, more heated. They both disappeared into the building, and our whole class rushed to the door. We could hear them in the hallway, Dante's voice getting madder. You think this is a game? You sold my brother fake. Then they turned into the principal's office. 30 seconds of dead silence. Then we heard this voice, not yelling, but that scary, calm lawyer voice that meant someone was about to get their whole life ruined. So you're the young man who's been threatening my son? I could see through the office window. Dante's face changed completely. Went from ready to throw hands to confused as hell in like half a second. He looked at Malik, then at the woman in the power suit, then at the principal. Wait, what? Nah, your son sold my brother. I have 38 text messages here, she cut him off, holding up Malik's phone. Including one that says, and I quote, you're gonna bleed. Dante's jaw dropped so hard I thought it was gonna hit the floor. The assistant principal stepped out from behind the office door and pointed at Dante. His voice was firm, but not loud when he said Dante needed to come inside right now. Dante's head swiveled between Malik sitting there calm as anything and the woman in the power suit standing with her arms crossed. You could see him trying to piece together what was happening, why this felt like a trap instead of the beatdown he came here to deliver. He walked into the office slow, like he was walking into something he didn't understand yet. Inside, Malik's mom reached into her briefcase and pulled out a stack of printed screenshots. She laid them across the principal's desk one by one, arranging them in neat rows like she was presenting evidence in an actual trial. Her voice stayed level and professional when she explained these 38 messages constituted criminal threats and harassment of a minor under state law. She didn't raise her voice once, but every word landed heavy, and I watched the principal's posture change as he leaned forward to read them. Fletcher picked up the first few messages, and his expression shifted from that annoyed look administrators get when parents show up unannounced to genuine concern. His eyes moved fast across the printed texts, and when he got to the ones that said, "You're gonna bleed and I know where your locker is," his jaw tightened. He looked up at Dante and asked him directly if he sent these messages. Dante just stood there frozen, his mouth half open like he wanted to say something, but couldn't get the words out. I could see it clicking in his head how bad this looked, how different threatening someone over text was from actually throwing hands in a parking lot. Malik's mom didn't wait for Dante to answer. She pulled a business card from her suit jacket and slid it across the desk to Fletcher with 2 fingers. The card had her name and title, Assistant District Attorney, and she explained in that same calm voice that she was prepared to file a police report for criminal threats and harassment unless the school took immediate action to protect her son. The way she said it wasn't aggressive, just matter of fact, like she was explaining how things were going to go and everyone else just needed to keep up. Fletcher picked up the business card and stared at it for a few seconds, and I swear I saw him swallow hard. Dante finally found his voice and started talking fast about how Malik sold his little brother fake shoes for $550. He was trying to explain that his brother saved up for months, and Malik straight up scammed him with knockoffs. But Malik's mom cut him off before he could get the whole story out. She said that was a civil matter between 2 minors, and it absolutely did not justify threatening violence against her son. Her tone didn't change at all when she said it, still professional and calm, but somehow that made it hit harder. Fletcher turned to Malik and asked him straight up if the shoe sale actually happened. Malik nodded and admitted he sold shoes to Dante's brother last Tuesday. But then he said he never told the kid they were real, just that they were Travis Scott Jordans, which technically they were even if they weren't authentic. The way he said it sounded rehearsed, like he'd practiced this exact explanation with his mom before they got here. I was watching all this through the office window, and our whole class had crowded around me trying to see. Derek was right next to me, and he kept whispering holy shit over and over under his breath. None of us expected Malik to flip the script like this, to turn himself from the one about to get jumped into the victim with legal protection. It was the craziest power move I'd ever seen at the school. Malik's mom started listing her expectations for how the school would handle this situation. She wanted Dante kept away from her son, no shared classes, different lunch periods, and she was prepared to seek a restraining order if necessary. Fletcher was nodding along and writing everything down in his notebook, like his entire job depended on following her instructions exactly. I watched Dante's face change 3 times in about 30 seconds. First confused, like he still didn't fully understand how he became the bad guy here. Then angry, his jaw clenching and his hands balling into fists at his sides. Then scared, and that's when it really hit different. This was the same dude who jumped 3 kids last year, who everyone was terrified of, and now he looked like a kid who just realized he was in serious trouble. His whole reputation for being the toughest guy in the school meant absolutely nothing against a prosecutor with printed evidence and legal threats. You could see it in his eyes when he figured out he had no power here. Fletcher picked up his office phone and dialed while everyone watched. We couldn't hear what he was saying through the window, but we could see Dante's reaction when he realized the principal was calling his parents. His shoulders dropped and he sank down in the chair, his head falling forward. The confident swagger he walked in with was completely gone. His parents were about to find out he threatened another student with violence over text, that the kid's mom was a prosecutor, and that the school was probably about to suspend or expel him. I saw him close his eyes and I almost felt bad for him, but then I remembered the text Malik showed me and how scared my boy was yesterday. The whole office scene was playing out like some legal drama, and we had front row seats through the glass. The office door opened and this woman in a security uniform walked in. I recognized her from the hallways, Alyssa Cabrera, the security officer who usually dealt with fights and kids skipping class. She said something to Fletcher and he nodded. Then she turned to Dante and gestured toward the door. Dante stood up slow, his whole body language different now, shoulders hunched forward like he was trying to make himself smaller. He followed her out of the office, and they started walking down the hallway toward our classroom. Every kid in first period was still pressed against the door watching this unfold. When Dante got close to our window, he turned his head and looked straight at Malik through the glass. The look on his face was something I'd never seen before. This mix of pure anger and complete helplessness, like he wanted to break through that window, but knew he couldn't do anything about it. His hands were balled up into fists at his sides and his jaw was clenched, so tight I could see the muscles working in his face. Then Alyssa put her hand on his shoulder and guided him past our classroom and he was gone. The whole class started talking at once, everyone asking what just happened and trying to piece together what they saw. Our teacher tried to get everyone back to their seats, but nobody was listening. We were all too hyped up from watching the whole thing go down. 20 minutes went by, and then the classroom door opened again. Malik walked in with his mom right behind him, and the entire room went dead silent. His mom stopped to talk to our teacher near the desk, her voice too quiet for us to hear, but we could see our teacher nodding along to whatever she was saying. Malik walked to his seat next to me, trying to act like everything was normal, like he hadn't just flipped the entire situation with Dante on its head. But when he sat down, I could see his hands were still shaking, just a little bit, like the fear from yesterday hadn't completely left his body yet. He pulled out his notebook and started writing something, but his pen was moving too fast, and the letters were too messy for it to be actual notes. I wanted to ask him what his mom said in that office, what version of the story he told her about the shoes. But with her standing right there talking to our teacher, I kept my mouth shut. After a few minutes, his mom finished talking and left, giving Malik one last look before she walked out. The second the door closed behind her, kids started whispering and pointing, and Malik just stared straight ahead at the board like he couldn't hear any of it. By lunch, the whole school knew what went down. We sat at our usual table and kids kept walking past asking Malik what happened, wanting to hear the story directly from him. Malik told it like he'd been in control the whole time, explaining how he knew his mom would handle it and how he never worried about Dante because he had the texts as evidence. He made it sound like bringing his prosecutor mom to the school was this genius move he planned from the start. But I was sitting right next to him yesterday when he was Googling how to transfer schools, when his hands were shaking, so bad he could barely hold his phone. The confident way he talked now didn't match up with how scared he was 24 hours ago, and I wasn't sure if he actually believed his own story or if he was just trying to convince everyone else. Derek was eating his lunch and nodding along, but he kept glancing at me like he was thinking the same thing. Some kids at the table were acting impressed, saying Malik was smart for using his resources instead of trying to fight Dante. Others weren't saying anything, but you could tell from their faces they thought something about the whole situation was off. Grace Pierce sat down at the table next to ours with her friends and started talking loud enough for everyone to hear. She was telling this version where Malik was a snitch who ran to his mommy instead of handling his business like a man. Some of the kids around her were nodding and agreeing, saying real people don't bring their parents into school drama. But then this junior from the football team spoke up and pointed out that Dante literally threatened to make Malik bleed in those texts, that this wasn't some fair fight situation. Dante was planning to jump him. Grace rolled her eyes and said Malik shouldn't have sold fake shoes in the first place if he didn't want problems, and technically she wasn't wrong about that part. The argument spread to other tables, kids picking sides based on whether they thought Malik was smart or whether they thought he was avoiding consequences for scamming someone. I just sat there eating my food and listening, not joining either side because I could see both points and neither one felt completely right. Phoenix Rogers walked over to our table and sat down across from Malik. Phoenix was usually Dante's backup, the guy who stood behind him when things got heated and everyone at the table got quiet when he showed up. He looked at Malik and asked straight up if the shoes he sold were fake. The way he said it wasn't aggressive, just direct, like he genuinely wanted to know the truth. Malik didn't even hesitate with his answer, going into this smooth explanation about the replica market and how everyone in the shoe game knows there's authentic and there's replica, and it's on the buyer to ask the right questions. He said he never claimed the shoes were authentic, just that they were Travis Scott Jordans, which they were, just not official ones from Nike. Phoenix listened to the whole thing and then asked if Dante's brother knew they were replicas when he bought them. Malik said that's between him and the customer, that he doesn't discuss individual sales. It was a slick answer that sounded good but didn't actually answer the question, and Phoenix seemed to realize that because he just nodded slow and got up from the table without saying anything else. The rest of the day felt weird, like the whole school was split down the middle about what happened. Some people thought Malik was brilliant for using his mom's position to protect himself from getting jumped. They said it was smart thinking, using the resources available to you instead of trying to be tough and ending up in the hospital. Other people thought he was a punk for avoiding a fair fight, that he scammed Dante's brother and then hid behind his mom when consequences showed up. I was somewhere in the middle of both sides, proud that my boy didn't get his ass beat by a linebacker who outweighed him by 50 pounds, but also uncomfortable with how everything went down. The sophomore kid lost all his money on fake shoes, and nobody seemed to care about that part. Dante got suspended for threatening Malik, which made sense because those texts were serious, but Malik never faced any consequences for selling fake shoes as real ones. By the time school ended, I had this feeling in my stomach that wouldn't go away, like something about the whole situation was wrong, even though I couldn't point to exactly what. That weekend I went to McDonald's to grab some food, and I saw Malik working behind the counter. I was waiting for my order when the door opened and the sophomore kid walked in. I recognized him immediately, even though I'd only seen him a few times in the hallways. He looked smaller than I remembered, younger, and when he walked up to the counter where Malik was standing, his eyes were red like he'd been crying or hadn't slept much. He asked Malik if they could talk for a minute, and Malik said he was working, so it had to be quick. The kid's voice was shaking when he asked for his money back, explaining that the shoes were falling apart already and that $550 was his whole savings from working all summer. He said he needed that money back because his parents didn't know he spent it, and he was supposed to use it for school supplies and clothes. Watching him stand there almost crying in the middle of McDonald's made my chest feel tight. Malik's face didn't change at all while the kid was talking. When the kid finished, Malik told him he couldn't give refunds, that the sale was final, and besides he never actually said the shoes were authentic, so there was nothing to refund. The kid just stood there staring at Malik like he couldn't believe what he was hearing, his mouth hanging open slightly. He tried to argue that Malik knew he thought they were real, that he wouldn't have paid that much for fakes, but Malik cut him off and said, "That's not how business works." The The kid's shoulders dropped and he turned around and walked out of McDonald's without even ordering food, and I watched him through the window getting into his mom's car outside. My burger and fries came up, but I wasn't hungry anymore. Just sat there staring at the food, thinking about how destroyed that kid looked when he left. Malik came over on his break and asked if I was good, and I said yeah, but I wasn't really good at all. Monday morning, Dante wasn't at the school. Word spread fast that he got suspended for 3 days because of the threatening texts, and the school was divided again on whether that was fair. Some kids said it made sense because you can't threaten to hurt someone and expect no consequences, that Dante should have gone to the principal himself instead of sending those messages. Other kids said the whole thing was messed up because Malik scammed Dante's brother first, that Dante was just trying to get his family's money back, and now he was the one getting punished while Malik walked around like nothing happened. I heard different versions of the story in every class, some people adding details that weren't true, others leaving out the part about the fake shoes completely. By lunch, everyone had an opinion, and nobody could agree on who was actually wrong in the situation. Malik's locker became this weird meeting spot where people came to ask if he was still selling shoes. I watched it happen between classes, kids walking up to him with cash in their hands wanting to know what he had available. His business actually increased after everything that happened, and that felt completely backwards to me. People wanted to buy from him now because they knew his mom would protect him if any deals went wrong, like having a prosecutor for a parent was some kind of insurance policy. Malik was showing kids pictures on his phone of new shoes he was planning to buy this weekend, taking orders and writing down sizes in his notebook. He looked happy, more confident than I'd seen him in weeks, counting money between classes and texting customers about upcoming releases. Nobody mentioned the sophomore kid or asked about the authenticity of what Malik was selling. They just wanted the shoes, and they trusted that Malik's mom would keep him safe if anything went sideways. I stood there watching the whole thing from down the hallway, and I couldn't shake this feeling that everything about the situation was wrong, even though I couldn't explain exactly why. Over the next few days, I started paying attention to how Malik talked about what happened, and it was wild how different his stories were depending on who was listening. When some freshman asked him about it in the hallway, Malik made himself sound like the victim who almost got jumped for no reason and had to get help from his mom. He left out the whole fake shoes part completely, just said Dante threatened him over some business deal gone wrong. But then later that same day, I heard him telling some juniors a totally different version where he was this genius who knew exactly how to play the system, like he planned the whole thing from the start, including getting his mom involved. He was laughing and acting like it was all strategy, talking about how he outmaneuvered someone twice his size without throwing a single punch. The fake shoes never came up in that version either, like that detail just disappeared from the story depending on who needed to hear what. I watched him do this over and over, switching between victim and mastermind, and it started messing with my head because I was there for all of it, and I knew the real story was messier than either version he was selling. After school on Wednesday, Derek pulled me aside by the bike racks where nobody else was around. He looked uncomfortable, kept glancing around to make sure Malik wasn't nearby. Then he just came out with it, asked me straight up if I thought what Malik did was right. I opened my mouth to answer, but nothing came out because I genuinely didn't know what to say. Dante definitely shouldn't have sent those threatening texts. That part was clear, like you can't tell someone you're gonna make them bleed and expect no consequences. But Malik did sell fake shoes for real shoe prices to a kid who trusted him, and that wasn't cool either. I told Derek I didn't know, that the whole thing felt wrong from every angle, and he nodded like he'd been thinking the same thing. We stood there for a minute not saying anything, both of us realizing our boy had done something we couldn't fully defend, even though we also didn't want to see him get jumped. Derek asked if I was still going to hang with Malik at lunch, and I said yeah, and he said yeah too, but we both knew something had shifted in how we saw him. Thursday at lunch, I noticed the sophomore kid wasn't at his usual table, and I asked around until someone told me he switched to 4th period lunch to avoid running into Malik. I had 5th period lunch, so I never saw him anymore, but one day I had to grab a book from the library during my free period, and there he was sitting alone at a table in the back corner eating a sandwich by himself. He had his headphones in and was staring at his phone, and something about seeing him there by himself hit me hard. This kid was the real victim in the whole situation, lost all his money buying fake shoes he thought were real, and now he was hiding in the library during lunch so he wouldn't have to see the person who scammed him. But nobody was talking about him. Everyone was too busy picking sides between Malik and Dante, or discussing whether Malik was smart or shady for using his mom's position. The kid looked up and saw me watching, and his face went red, and I felt like garbage for even being there, so I grabbed my book and left. Monday morning, Dante came back to the school after his 3-day suspension, and the energy around him was completely different. I saw him walking through the hallway between 2nd and 3rd period, and he moved like someone who'd been beaten down, not physically, but in some other way that was maybe worse. He walked right past Malik at the water fountain and didn't even look at him, just kept his eyes straight ahead and kept moving. You could tell he'd been warned about any kind of retaliation, probably by his parents and the school, and maybe even the cops, and he knew one wrong move would get him expelled or arrested or both. Some kids were staring at him waiting for something to happen, but nothing did. He just went to his locker and then to class like it was a normal day. Malik watched him walk past with this little smile on his face, and I realized my boy knew he was untouchable now. That same week, Malik started getting way bolder with his whole operation. He was showing me his phone between classes, scrolling through messages from juniors and seniors, asking what shoes he had available and when the next drop was. His DMs were packed, like 30 unread messages, and he was grinning while he showed me. He told me he was planning to hit up another store release this weekend, some limited edition sneakers dropping Saturday morning, and he was going to camp out Friday night to be first in line. But he wasn't stopping at shoes anymore. He was talking about expanding into clothes, said he could get designer hoodies and jackets from the same suppliers who got him the shoes. I asked him what happens if someone else figures out the shoes are fake and comes after him like Dante did. He just shrugged and said his mom already established the precedent that threats against him have consequences, so people would think twice before trying anything. The way he said it was so casual, like he'd found this perfect loophole where he could keep scamming people, and his mom's job would protect him from anyone who got mad about it. I didn't say anything, but I was thinking about that sophomore kid eating alone in the library and wondering how many more kids would end up like that. In gym class on Friday, Phoenix came up to me while we were supposed to be running laps. He was Dante's boy, usually backed him up in everything, but now he looked stressed. He told me Dante's parents grounded him for months, like serious lockdown. No car, no phone except for emergencies, straight home after school every day. They took his car away completely, not just grounded from driving it, but actually sold it, and apparently the whole family was pissed at him. Phoenix said Dante's dad was furious that his son got baited into threatening someone whose mom is a prosecutor, called him stupid for not thinking before he acted. The family lost money on lawyer consultations, even though no charges got filed, and Dante's younger brother, the sophomore kid, was apparently so embarrassed by the whole thing that he begged their parents to let him transfer schools. Phoenix said it quiet, looking around to make sure nobody heard, and I could tell he was scared the same thing might happen to him just for being associated with Dante. Tuesday morning, I was walking to third period, and I saw the sophomore kid's shoes in the hallway before I saw him. The fake leather was already cracking after just 2 weeks, these big, obvious splits along the sides where you could see the cheap material underneath. He was trying to walk in a way that hid them, keeping close to the lockers, but people noticed anyway. Some kids started laughing and pointing, and I heard someone say something about bootleg Jordans falling apart. The kid's face went red, and he walked faster, trying to get away from the attention, and right then Malik walked past going the other direction. He looked right at the kid, at the cracking shoes, and his face didn't change at all, just kept walking like he didn't even see it. The kid watched Malik walk away, and the look on his face was pure hurt mixed with anger, but he didn't say anything, just kept moving toward his class. At lunch that day, Grace showed up at our table looking mad. She walked right up to where Malik was sitting and didn't even bother with small talk, just asked him straight up if he scammed that sophomore kid with fake shoes. The whole table went quiet. Everyone stopped eating and looked at Malik to see how he'd react. Malik gave her the same line he'd been using, said the replica market is a real thing, and it's buyer beware, that he never explicitly said the shoes were authentic, so technically he didn't lie. Grace wasn't having it, called him a fraud right to his face in front of everyone, said he knew that kid thought the shoes were real. That's why he charged real shoe prices, and hiding behind technicalities didn't change the fact that he scammed someone. The table stayed quiet, and I was waiting for Malik to get mad, maybe yell back or tell her to mind her business. But he just laughed, this casual laugh like nothing she said mattered, and told her she was jealous she doesn't have the hustle to make money like he does. Some people at the table laughed with him, but others looked uncomfortable, shifting in their seats and not making eye contact. Grace stared at him for a few more seconds, then shook her head and walked away. Malik went back to eating his lunch like nothing happened, but I noticed his hand was shaking a little when he picked up his fork. That afternoon, I was sitting in history class not paying attention to anything the teacher was saying because I kept thinking about how different Malik used to be freshman year. Back then, he was always hustling, yeah, but it felt more like real business, like he was learning how to make money the right way. He'd buy candy in bulk and sell it at the school for profit, or he'd offer to do people's homework for $20 and nobody felt scammed because they knew exactly what they were getting. Somewhere between then and now, that line got crossed and I couldn't pinpoint exactly when it happened, just that the Malik sitting at lunch today wasn't the same kid I became friends with 2 years ago. My phone buzzed in my pocket during last period, and I waited till I got to my locker to check it. 3 texts from Malik asking if I wanted to partner up on his next buy, saying we could split profits 50-50, and I'd make serious money just for helping him camp out at the store and carry boxes. I stared at those messages for a solid minute, trying to figure out what to say, because the thing was, Malik had no idea I was having doubts about his whole operation. To him, everything was going perfect, business was booming, his mom had his back, and now he wanted to bring me in deeper. I typed out like 4 different responses and deleted all of them, finally just putting my phone away without answering at all. 20 minutes later, he sent me screenshots of his sales from the past week, and my jaw actually dropped looking at the numbers. This man had made over $2,000 in 7 days selling shoes to kids at our school. The screenshots showed transaction after transaction, mostly through Venmo and Cash App, with amounts ranging from $300 to $800 per sale. Then he sent another text talking about how he was thinking of quitting McDonald's to focus on this full-time, which sounded absolutely insane for a 10th grader, but looking at those numbers, I could see why he was considering it. I finally texted back something vague about needing to think about it, and he just sent back a thumbs up like he knew I'd come around eventually. Next morning at the school, I noticed something I hadn't really paid attention to before. Malik's relationship with everyone had completely changed, and you could see it in how people acted around him. Some kids treated him like he was untouchable now, giving him props in the hallway and asking when he'd have new inventory, acting like he was some kind of celebrity instead of just another 10th grader. But other people straight up avoided him, crossing to the other side of the hall when they saw him coming, or suddenly getting real interested in their phones when he walked past. And nobody, literally nobody, treated him like just a regular kid anymore. He was either the plug or the scammer depending on who you asked, but he wasn't just Malik, my friend who worked at McDonald's and liked basketball. After third period, this kid I barely knew came up to me in the hallway looking nervous as hell. Turned out he was friends with the sophomore who bought the fake Jordans, and he asked me real quiet if I thought Malik would give a partial refund, like maybe half the money back since the shoes were falling apart already. I looked at this kid's face and I could tell he'd been sent to ask me because everyone knew Malik and I were tight, or used to be tight anyway. I told him honestly that I doubted Malik would give any money back, and the kid's whole face just fell, shoulders slumping like I'd confirmed his worst fear. He thanked me anyway and walked off, and I felt guilty just for being Malik's friend. Like I was part of the scam even though I never sold anything to anyone. At lunch, I made a decision without really thinking about it too hard. Instead of sitting at our usual table, I grabbed my tray and sat at a different spot across the cafeteria, not completely avoiding Malik, but definitely creating some distance between us. I could see him notice when he walked in with his food, his eyes scanning the room and landing on me at the other table. Derek sat down next to me about 5 minutes later and asked straight up if everything was cool between me and Malik. I said yeah, but we both knew it wasn't entirely true. You could hear it in my voice. Derek didn't push it though, just nodded and started eating his pizza. 2 days later, I was walking past the junior parking lot after school, and I saw Malik making another sale. Some junior I recognized from gym class was checking out a pair of shoes that looked suspect as hell. The stitching was off and the color seemed wrong, but the kid didn't seem to care at all. He handed Malik a stack of cash right there in the parking lot, and Malik counted it quick before giving him the shoes. The junior walked away happy as anything, already taking pictures of the shoes to post somewhere, and that's when it hit me. Some of Malik's customers knew exactly what they were buying. They didn't care if the shoes were real or fake, they just wanted the clout of having them, wanted to flex on social media, and act like they could afford authentic limited editions. But that didn't change what happened with the sophomore kid, who clearly thought he was getting real shoes, who saved up all his money believing Malik was selling him something authentic. I caught up with Malik after school that same day, and brought it up, tried to talk to him about the sophomore situation. He got defensive immediately, his whole body language changing, saying the kid should have known better than to trust a high school dealer and that everyone knows you take risks buying from someone who's not an official store. I felt my frustration building because he was missing the entire point. We got into our first real argument right there on the sidewalk outside school. I told him he straight up scammed that kid and then hid behind his mom when consequences came, and that wasn't okay no matter how he tried to spin it. Malik fired back that I was just jealous of his success, that I was mad I didn't think of the business first, and now I was trying to make him feel bad for being smarter than everyone else. His voice got louder and people walking past started staring at us. I told him it wasn't about jealousy, it was about basic right and wrong, about not screwing over a kid who trusted him. He said trust was the kid's mistake, not his problem, and that's when I realized we weren't going to agree on this. Not now, and maybe not ever. The argument ended with both of us pissed off and we didn't talk for 3 days after that. I'd see him in the hallways and we'd just walk past each other without saying anything, both of us too stubborn to be the first one to back down. Other people at our lunch table definitely noticed the tension, and it made everything weird because some of them started picking sides. A couple kids thought I was being too hard on Malik and that he was just doing business, while others agreed with me that what he did to the sophomore was messed up. The whole lunch table got divided and uncomfortable, and I started wondering if this friendship was even worth saving at this point. Derek caught me after 6th period the next day and pulled me into an empty classroom. He closed the door and leaned against a desk with his arms crossed, looking at me like he was about to give some serious advice. He told me straight up that Malik wasn't going to change his mind about the business, that he'd already committed to this path, and nothing I said was going to make him stop selling shoes. Then he said I wasn't wrong for having problems with how Malik did things, that my concerns were valid, and I had every right to feel the way I did. But he also said neither of us was listening to the other anymore. We were just arguing in circles and making everything worse. I appreciated what Derek was trying to do, but it didn't really help, because the problem wasn't about communication. It was about Malik thinking scamming people were okay, and me thinking it wasn't. Derek must have talked to Malik too, because later that day, I saw them standing by Malik's locker having a serious conversation. Malik nodding, but looking annoyed like he didn't want to hear it. The whole mediation thing just made me realize how far apart Malik and I had gotten in our thinking, like we were looking at the same situation and seeing completely different things. A few days later, I was walking through the parking lot after school, and I saw Malik's mom pull up in her car. She was still in her work clothes, that same power suit energy, and Malik jogged over and got in the passenger seat. I watched them drive away, and this question hit me hard. What version of his business did she actually know about? Did she know he was selling fake shoes and calling them real, taking kids' savings and giving them garbage that would fall apart in 2 weeks? Or did he just tell her he ran a resale business and someone threatened him over a deal gone wrong, leaving out the part where he was straight up scamming people? I figured it was probably the second version because no way would a prosecutor be cool with her son running a fraud operation. She probably thought he was just a young entrepreneur getting bullied by some aggressive kid. That thought bothered me more than it should have because it meant Malik was lying to everyone, his customers about the shoes and his mom about what he was really doing. The following week, I heard the sophomore kid transferred to a different school, and my stomach dropped when I found out why. People were saying he got bullied so bad about the fake shoes that he couldn't handle being here anymore. Kids were clowning him in the hallways and posting pictures of his busted shoes online. His parents pulled him out and enrolled him somewhere across town where nobody knew about the situation. That news sat heavy in my stomach for the rest of the day. This kid lost his money and his confidence and had to leave his whole school behind because Malik sold him fake shoes and then hid behind his mom when consequences came. I kept thinking about how the sophomore was probably the biggest victim in this whole situation, but nobody was talking about him. Everyone was focused on the drama between Malik and Dante. When I mentioned the transfer to Malik at lunch, he barely looked up from his phone. He just said that's crazy and went right back to scrolling through shoe releases, his thumb moving fast like he was shopping for his next inventory. That's when it really hit me that he didn't feel responsible for what happened. In his mind, the sophomore should have known better or been more careful or something. He genuinely believed he did nothing wrong, and the kid transferring schools was just an unfortunate thing that happened, not a direct result of his actions. I sat there watching him scroll and realized I couldn't be part of this anymore, couldn't be associated with someone who hurt people and felt nothing about it. That weekend, Malik texted me asking if I wanted to come to a shoe release with him on Saturday morning. He said he was hitting up 3 different stores and could use backup to help carry boxes and watch for security. I stared at that text for a solid 10 minutes before I finally typed back that I was done being part of his business in any way. I told him I couldn't support what he was doing anymore, and I didn't want to be associated with his operation. He called me immediately, and I could hear the anger in his voice before he even started talking. He said I was abandoning him right after he almost got jumped, that he needed people he could trust, and I was bailing when things got real. I tried to explain that I'd still be his friend, but I couldn't support scamming people, that those were 2 different things. But Malik wasn't hearing it. He said if I wasn't with him, I was against him, and there was no middle ground. The call ended badly with both of us frustrated, and I felt this weight in my chest knowing our friendship was probably over. After that, everything got weird and distant between us. We still sat at the same lunch table because changing tables would have been too obvious and dramatic, but we didn't talk directly to each other anymore. I'd talk to Derek and he'd talk to other kids, and everyone could feel the tension whenever we were in the same space. It was like there was this invisible wall between us, and neither of us knew how to break it down, or if we even wanted to. Other kids at the table would try to include both of us in conversations, but it always got awkward, and eventually they stopped trying. Derek pulled me aside one day after school and told me privately that Malik was planning something bigger. He said Malik was talking about buying limited edition sneakers in bulk and selling them online through some app or website, treating it like a real business now instead of just hallway deals. He was getting more sophisticated with his operation, learning about shipping and online payment systems, and building a customer base outside our school. I listened to Derek explain all this, and I felt relieved that I'd stepped away when I did, because Malik was clearly going deeper into this world, and I wanted no part of it. Grace caught me between classes one day and mentioned that Dante was still on thin ice at the school. She said any hint of aggression toward anyone, and he'd be expelled immediately. The principal was watching him like a hawk, and he knew it. So Dante was basically keeping his head down and staying away from everyone involved in the situation, walking the hallways quiet and careful, like a completely different person. I almost felt bad for him because, yeah, he threatened Malik, which was wrong. But Malik had scammed his brother first, and Dante was the only one who faced real consequences. 3 weeks after everything went down, I went to a basketball game with some kids from my new lunch group. During halftime, I was getting food from the concession stand, and this kid came up to me, someone I vaguely recognized. He said he was friends with the sophomore who transferred, and I immediately got nervous. But he wasn't mad. He just wanted to tell me his friend was doing better at the new school, making new friends and getting a fresh start. Then he said his friend lost all his savings and a lot of his confidence from what happened, that it took him weeks to even want to go outside because he felt so stupid for getting scammed. I stood there holding my nachos, feeling guilty, even though I didn't sell the shoes. Guilty because I was Malik's friend, and I knew what he was doing, and I didn't stop it until it was too late. I walked home that night replaying every moment I watched Malik operate his business and never said anything real to stop him. I knew what he was doing from the start, saw him marketing fake shoes as real ones, watched him count money from kids who trusted him, and I just sat there like it was entertainment. The sophomore kid transferring schools hit different because I finally saw the damage up close instead of just hearing about profits and sales numbers. I texted Malik that night asking if we could talk in person because this conversation needed to happen face to face. He responded an hour later saying he could meet me at the park near school tomorrow after classes ended. I barely slept thinking about what I needed to say and how he'd probably react to it. Next afternoon, I got to the park first and sat on the swings waiting for him to show up. Malik walked over 15 minutes late wearing a fresh pair of Jordans I knew cost at least $300. He sat on the swing next to mine and asked what was so important that I needed this whole meeting. I told him straight up that I thought what he did to the sophomore was wrong, and using his mom's legal power to avoid getting jumped didn't make the original scam right. Malik's face changed immediately and he stopped swinging. He said I was being self-righteous and acting like I was better than him when I never complained about his business before. I tried explaining that watching someone actually get hurt made me see things differently, but he cut me off. Malik said I didn't understand real hustle culture and that everyone in the resale game operated the same way he did. He told me his customers knew the risks when they bought from a high school dealer and the sophomore should have been smarter with his money. I asked him if he actually believed that, or if he was just telling himself that to feel better about scamming a kid. Malik stood up from the swing and said, if I had such a problem with his business, then maybe we shouldn't be friends anymore. I sat there looking at him, realizing this was the moment our friendship actually ended, even though we'd been growing apart for weeks. We agreed to disagree about the whole situation, and Malik said we could still be cool at the school, but he wasn't going to change how he operated. I told him I respected his choice, but I couldn't support it anymore, and that had to be okay too. We walked away from that park in different directions, and I felt sad, but also relieved that I finally said what needed to be said. The next week at the school, everything shifted between us in obvious ways that everyone could see. We still sat at the same lunch table because switching tables would have made everything weird and dramatic, but we stopped talking directly to each other. I'd have conversations with Derek and other kids while Malik talked to different people, and there was this invisible wall between us the whole time. Other kids at the table tried including both of us in group conversations, but it always got awkward, and eventually they stopped trying. After 2 weeks of that tension, I decided to just switch lunch tables completely, because sitting there pretending everything was normal felt worse than making a clean break. I started sitting with Derek and some other kids who weren't involved in Malik's business at all. The new group was way more chill, and we talked about normal stuff like video games and sports instead of sneaker releases and profit margins. Sitting with them made me realize how much stress I'd been carrying being close to someone operating in such a gray area all the time. I didn't have to worry about who was getting scammed or what drama might blow up next, and that peace felt good. Derek mentioned one day at lunch that Malik's business was actually growing bigger now, and he was making serious money from it. I'd see Malik in the hallways between classes wearing expensive designer clothes and limited edition shoes that probably cost more than what most kids' parents made in a week. Some kids looked at him with admiration like he was some kind of genius entrepreneur who figured out the game. Other kids thought he was becoming someone completely different from who he used to be freshman year when he was just a regular kid working at McDonald's. I noticed Malik surrounded by more people than ever, but they all seemed like business connections rather than actual friends. Sometimes I'd see him in the hallway and we'd nod at each other in acknowledgement, but we never stopped to actually talk. There was this weird understanding between us that we both made our choices about who we wanted to be, and neither of us was backing down from our position. It felt sad knowing someone I used to be so close with was now basically a stranger, but it also felt necessary because we'd grown in such different directions. Grace caught me after history class one day and said she wanted to tell me something. She said she respected that I stepped away from the situation with Malik instead of either blindly supporting him or completely turning on him. Grace explained that most people in high school either ride or die with their friends no matter what, or they flip on them completely, and both extremes were easier than finding middle ground. She said what I did was harder but more honest, and that mattered even if other people didn't see it that way. Her saying that meant more to me than I expected, because I'd been wondering if I made the right choice. End of the school year finally came, and Dante graduated with the rest of the seniors. I heard through people that he got a football scholarship to some small college a few states away. His younger brother never came back to our school after transferring, and I wondered sometimes if he ever got over losing all that money and having his trust broken like that. Malik was still running his whole operation at the end of sophomore year, and if anything, he was more successful than ever before. He had customers from other schools now, and was selling online through apps and websites like a real business. But watching him walk through the hallways, I noticed he had fewer actual friends around him, even though more people knew his name. He was surrounded by kids who wanted to buy from him or partner with him or learn his methods, but I wasn't sure anyone actually knew him as a person anymore. I thought about the whole situation a lot that summer, and what it taught me about power and consequences. Malik had his mom's legal protection, and he used it to avoid getting jumped by Dante, which made sense from a survival perspective. But that power play didn't change the fact that he scammed someone who trusted him and took their money knowing the shoes were fake. Having power doesn't make you right, and avoiding consequences doesn't mean you didn't do something wrong in the first place. Derek and I started having these conversations during lunch at our new table, away from Malik and his business crowd. We'd talk about what went down and try to make sense of it all. One day, Derek said straight up that if someone tried to jump Malik tomorrow, he'd still help defend him because that's what friends do. I nodded because I felt the same way about physical safety. But then Derek added that defending someone from getting hurt is different from defending how they make their money. We both agreed we couldn't support the scamming part, even if we'd still have Malik's back in a fight. That distinction mattered to us even though it made everything more complicated. The sophomore kid's locker stayed empty for weeks after he transferred out. I walked past it every day on my way to third period, and every single time I thought about that transaction. $550 gone, just like that. The locker had some scratches on it and a dent near the bottom, and I wondered if the kid ever got angry enough to punch it before he left. Eventually, the school assigned it to a freshman who had no idea about the history, but I still thought about it each time I passed. That empty locker represented someone's entire savings getting destroyed and their trust in people getting broken, all from one fake shoe sale that pushed them out of our school completely. Watching what happened to Dante versus what happened to Malik taught me something about how justice actually works in the real world. Dante got suspended for 3 days, lost his car, got grounded for months, and had to walk on eggshells at the school for the rest of the year. All that punishment made sense because threatening to make someone bleed is obviously wrong and dangerous. But Malik never faced any real consequences for the fraud that started the whole situation. He kept his money, kept his business, actually grew his operation, and his mom's legal threats protected him from any pushback. That felt wrong even though I understood it was technically legal, since he never explicitly promised the shoes were authentic. The system punished the threat of violence, but ignored the actual scam, and that imbalance stuck with me as something deeply unfair about how things work. By the end of sophomore year, I'd accepted that Malik and I had grown into different people who couldn't stay close friends anymore. We had something real back in freshman year when he was just a regular kid working at McDonald's and dreaming about starting a business. But somewhere along the way, his hustle became more important than his integrity, and making money mattered more than how he made it or who got hurt in the process. I couldn't follow him down that path even though part of me understood the appeal of his success. We were both doing fine in our separate ways, him with his growing business and designer clothes, me with my new lunch table and clearer conscience. But I missed the version of my friend who existed before money and power changed what he thought was acceptable, before he learned that having a prosecutor mom meant he could get away with things that would get other people beat up or expelled.